All right, we are going to talk about perpendicular lines. So two lines are perpendicular if they intersect and form right angles. So let's look here. So a perpendicular line would be something like this, like a line like that, and then another one that went like exactly like that. And then, so those would be perpendicular lines. And then they have this like little box right there to show that they're perpendicular, and which it just means that they form 90 degrees. You would probably be like most used to like what, like this, right? That's perpendicular, 90 degrees. Now, perpendicular lines have some different characteristics. So the characteristic that we are going to be using is if the product, and what's product mean? Multiplication. This means multiplication, right? It's the answer to a multiplication problem. Okay, so the product of the slopes of the two lines is -1. Then the two lines are parallel. So if the product of the slopes, so basically if you multiply the slopes together and you get -1, then the slopes are perpendicular. So let's think about that. How do you multiply two numbers together and get -1? Well, how do you get a negative number? Well, what do I know? To get a negative number, I know that I have to have a positive number multiplied by a negative number, right? Because that's the only way you can get a negative number, equals a negative. So I have to have like +2 times -1, and then I get a -2, right? Anything else, like a positive times a positive is going to be a positive, or a negative times a negative is going to be a positive. So really, this gives us a clue. So the first clue is that we have to have a positive and negative number. So just looking at the slopes, if we know that we have two positive slopes, then they're never going to be perpendicular, okay? So that's kind of like our first characteristic when we're looking at those slopes. One has to be positive and the other has to be negative. So I like to say they have opposite signs, okay? Okay, so they have to have opposite signs. We'll just say that. Opposite signs. Opposite signs for slope. Okay. Opposite signs for slopes. And then what else? Okay, so that's how we get the negative, but how do we get 1? Well, obviously, like 1 times 1 equals 1. That's obvious. But what if we had something like 3/4? How do we make that into 1? Well, what happened if we multiply by the reciprocal? 4/3. Well, these would all cancel out and be 1, right? So that's how we get 1. So we know that we'd have to have opposite signs. So one would have to be positive and the other would have to be negative, right? And then we'd end up with that -1. So that means that the slopes must be reciprocals of each other. Reciprocals of each other. Slopes must be reciprocals. So that's really the two characteristics, okay? That's how you get that -1. You have opposite signs for the slopes, and the slopes must be reciprocals. So let's say we had something like -2/3. Well, the slope that was perpendicular, if this is negative, it would have to be positive, right? So if the slope, this was the slope, then the slope that was perpendicular would have to be positive, and it would have to be the reciprocal, 3/2. Boom, those would be perpendicular. Woohoo! What if we had something like the slope is equal to 5? Ooh, that one's tricky. Because what's the reciprocal of 5? Okay, so this is positive. We know that our answer would, our slope would have to be negative, but what would be the reciprocal of 5? Well, what do we know about 5? 5 is the same thing as 5/1, so the reciprocal would be 1/5. So if we had that, those were the slopes of two lines. They would be perpendicular, because if you multiplied those two numbers or you multiplied those two numbers together, you would get -1. All right, perfect. Let's go ahead and look at our first example. Okay, so we're gonna find the slope. So really this, like parallel lines, we had to do the slope and the y-intercept. For this, we really just have to look at the slope, okay? It's all about the slope. Who cares about the y-intercept? So slopes have to be opposite signs and reciprocals. Okay, this is nice. This is already in slope-intercept form. Perfect. So what's the slope? Y equals mx plus b. The slope is equal to -3. What about here? Y equals mx plus b. Slope is 3. What about here? Y equals mx plus b. That's nice. The slope is equal to -1/3. So we need opposite signs and reciprocals. So these are opposite signs, but they're not reciprocals. So those aren't perpendicular. Okay, so this one's not perpendicular to this one. What about this one? Well, they're both negative. So this one is not perpendicular to this one or this one. So since they're both negative, they would never be able to get a -1. So that means this one's out. What about this one? Okay, this one's positive and that's negative. That's good. And then this is like what, 3/1, and that's the reciprocal. So those two lines are perpendicular. So we can say y equals 3x plus 2 is perpendicular. Look at that. That means perpendicular. Just take that all in. Let's make a little note. This means perpendicular. See, look at, who wants to write the word perpendicular when you can just go boom, boom, done. That means perpendicular. So this line is perpendicular to this line. There's our answer, and then we just need to go ahead and graph them. So on this first one, I'm going to graph the y-intercept, which is 2, and then up 3, 1, 2, 3 over 1. Do the opposite. Oh, you can't even see. Okay, my y-intercept was 2. I went up 3 over 1. Do the opposite, down 3, 1, 2, 3 over 1. And then it's time to connect the dots. Right there. Ooh, that one felt good. Okay, and then we do the next one, which is y equals -1/3. So the y-intercept is 3. And then down 1 over 3. Oh, that's not 3. Down 1 over 1, 2, 3. This is 3. Make that bigger. And then the opposite, up 1 over 3, 1, 2, 3, right there. Connect the dots. And look at those perpendicular lines. They're so fun. We'll put a little symbol like that, meaning that they are perpendicular. I can label them, right? So this is y equals 3x plus 2, and this is y equals -1/3 x plus 3. Boom! That is it. Those two lines are perpendicular. All right, let's go ahead and look at the next example here. So what do we have? We have this right here. Okay, so we just need to determine what lines are perpendicular. So we have the slope here. This is nice. It's already in slope-intercept form. So the slope is -2/3. What about the slope here? Is 3 over 2, right? Y equals mx plus b. And the slope here is, the slope is equal to 2/3. Okay, so we need a negative and a positive. This is our only negative, and those both are positive, so they can't be perpendicular to each other. So it has to be perpendicular to this one. So basically, this is negative, so we need the reciprocal of this, which would be 3 over 2, which is this one. So these two are the ones that are perpendicular. So I'm going to write it right here. Y equals -2/3 x plus 2 is perpendicular to y equals 3 over 2x plus 1. Okay, that is our answer. And then we just go ahead and graph it. So plus 2, right here, y-intercept is plus 2, and then down 2 over 3, opposite up 2 over 3 this way. Graph the lines. Here. Okay. And then we have to graph the other one, which is right here. Y-intercept is +1. And then what do we do from here? +1 up 3. The slope is 3 over 2. So 1, 2, 3 over 2. And the opposite down 3, 1, 2, 3 over 2. And then just go ahead and graph it. And there we have it. We'll go ahead and put that little box, which means they're perpendicular. I'll go ahead and label these lines. And And what's this one? Y equals negative 2 over 3x plus 2. Perfect. Let's go ahead and look at the next one down here. Okay. Yeah, this one's getting intense. Okay, so this one's in slope-intercept form, right? We just need to figure out what the slopes are to determine whether they're perpendicular or not. So here the slope is equal to 1/3. Here, this is in point slope form. So y minus y1 equals m. That's our slope. So 3 equals 3. This is a y equals negative 3. Y equals negative 3. That is a horizontal line, which means the slope is 0. Okay, and then what about this one? This is in slope-intercept form. That's nice. Y equals mx plus b. So m is right here. M equals negative 3. Okay, so I see a lot of action with 3s. There's nothing that has to do, okay, so you're just out. We need a positive and we need a negative, right? So this is our only negative. So we know that this one we're gonna probably need the reciprocal, because you have two positive numbers. They can't be perpendicular to each other because one has to be positive, one has to be negative. So this is our only negative, which means it has to be the reciprocal of this. And this is 3 over 1, so we're looking for a positive 1/3, which is right here. So that means that these two lines are perpendicular to each other. So I'm going to say y equals 1/3 x minus 2. This one is perpendicular to y equals negative 3x plus 9. There's my answer, and then I just need to go ahead and graph and label. So what do we have? We have the y-intercept is negative 2, and then our slope is up 1 over 3, up 1 over 3, up 1 over 1, 2, 3, and the opposite down 1 over 1, 2, 3. Okay, we can go ahead and graph this line here. Okay, and that is y equals 1/3 x minus 2. And then we need to graph this one, which is positive 9, right? That's the y-intercept. And then down 3, 1, 2, 3 over 1. Down 3, 1, 2, 3 over 1. Okay, go ahead and graph this one. Okay, and then just go ahead and make that little perpendicular mark there, and then label, oops, did you see I made that perpendicular mark there, and then label this one. This is y equals negative 3x plus 9, and there we have it. All right, perfect. Okay, let's look at the next example. Okay, so we are identifying which two lines are perpendicular, and then we're going to graph them. Perfect, perfect. Okay, so what do we see here? Y equals 4. Y equals 4. Y equals 4. Y equals 4. Okay, so that's going to be a horizontal line, which means the slope is 0. M equals 0. Then we have, direct variation. Y equals kx, and k is the same thing as the slope. So the slope is equal to 1/8 here. And then we have x equals negative 2, so x equals negative 2, Joy. Negative 2 is over here. So that is a vertical line, so that means the slope is undefined. And then what do we have here? We have, slope-intercept form. Y equals mx plus b, so the slope is equal to 8. This is interesting because we don't really have anything that has a positive and a negative slope, right? You need, for perpendicular, one has to be positive and one needs to be negative. And we don't have that, except for one thing. And the one thing is if you have a horizontal line is always perpendicular to a vertical line. Always, 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 right? It makes sense. If you have a horizontal line and then you have a vertical line, they're always going to be perpendicular to each other, and that's what we have right here. We have a horizontal line and a perpendicular line, so we can say that y equals 4 is perpendicular to x equals negative 2. Okay, so that's kind of like the little extra tidbit with the perpendicular lines. Horizontal lines and vertical lines are perpendicular to each other. Okay, so you have to remember that. Okay. So there's our answer. Now we just need to graph them. So y equals 4. where's y equals 4? Y is 4, so there's a nice little horizontal line. And then negative x equal negative 2, there's our little vertical line. And you can see they're totally perpendicular to each other, right? Put that little line. What was this? This was y equals 4, and this was x equals negative 2. Boom, that's it. All right, now I want you to go ahead and try this one, this problem on your own. Here's my friend, the pause dragon. Remind you to pause your device. Go ahead and work out the problem. When you get done, press play, and we'll go over it together. All right, see you in a bit. Let's see how you did. Okay, so what do we have here? Y equals negative 2. Okay, so that's a horizontal, which means the slope is equal to 0. This slope, it's in slope-intercept form, which is nice. So we know that the y equals mx plus b. The slope is negative 1/2. We have point slope form. Y minus y1 equals m. So that's our slope. And then we have, direct variation, which is y equals kx, and k is the same thing as our m, which is our slope. So we know that the slope is equal to negative 2. All right, so I see a lot of like 2's here. We don't, if we had something that was perpendicular to a, what is this? A horizontal line, we need a vertical line, and we don't have that, so that means this one's out. So we basically need something that is a positive and negative, and that are reciprocals of each other. So these are basically the same. One's positive, one's negative, but they're not reciprocals of each other. So this negative 1/2 is the only one that's kind of a fraction. So we know we're going to be using this one. So we need, if this is negative, we need one that's positive, which means this one is out. And yeah, the reciprocal of 1/2 would be 2/1, which this one is. So perfect. These two are perpendicular. So we would say y equals negative 1/2 x minus 4 is perpendicular to y minus 4 equals 2 multiplied by the quantity x plus 1. All right, there is our answer. Now we just go ahead and graph. So we're going to graph that y-intercept first, negative 4. And then from there, we're going to graph the slope down 1/2, down 1/2, down 1/2, the opposite up 1/2 there. Okay. Okay. There we go. Then we have to graph with the point slope form, and we totally can because it's giving us a point and a slope. So we know our slope is this. What is the point it's giving us? Well, it's going to be opposite this. So if this is a positive, it's giving us -1 and opposite of -4, which would be +4. Yes, so we graph this point here, -1, 4, and then from there we graph the slope, which is 2/1, 2/1, 2/1, 2/1, opposite down 2/1, down 2/1. We go ahead and graph that line. And we have our two perpendicular lines. And we'll just go ahead and, what will we do? We will label them, and then we are good. What was this one? Y equals -1/2 x minus 4. Perfect. Okay, on to our next problem here. So we're going to identify which lines are perpendicular and then graph them. Oh, this is for you to do. So go ahead, pause your device, go ahead and work this problem out. When you get done, press play and we'll talk about it. All right, see you in a bit. All right, let's see how you did. Okay, so what is the slope here? This is in slope-intercept form, so we know the slope is 1/2. Ooh, this one is not in slope-intercept form. This is in some crazy form. So we need to get it in slope-intercept form to figure out what the slope is. So I'm going to subtract 1 to both sides. Y equals -2x minus 1. That means now it's in y equals mx plus b. So we know that the slope is -2. And then, ooh, y equals 1/2. Y equals 1/2 would be here. So this would be a horizontal line. I'm sorry, horizontal line, which means the slope is equal to 0. And then this one, ooh, standard form, we got to put it into slope-intercept form. So I'm going to subtract 2x. I have negative y equals, we're going to put y equals mx, so we're going to put this first, plus b. And is y by itself? No, it's not by itself because of this negative 1. So we have to multiply everything by a negative 1. Okay, so negative times a negative is a positive. And then negative times a negative is a positive 2x, and negative times a positive is a negative 1. Okay, and now we have in slope-intercept form, and our slope is equal to 2. Okay, so we know that this one is out because there's not anything that's undefined, and that's what it need to be perpendicular. What about here? The only one that is a fraction is 1/2, and it's positive, so we know that our answer is going to need to be negative, which is right here. So a positive and a positive wouldn't work. So these are our two perpendicular lines, and they are reciprocal. So positive, negative, and 1/2, 2/1, they equal, when you multiply those two together, you get negative 1. So we're going to say our answer is y equals 1/2 x plus 2 is perpendicular to, we're going to write that original equation, y plus 1 equals negative 2x. Okay, there's our answer. Now we just need to graph them. So I'm going to graph that y-intercept of 2, and then the slope is up 1/2, up 1/2. Okay, go ahead and label that. Y equals 1/2 x plus 2. And then we need to graph this one here, which is the y-intercept is negative 1. And the slope is down 2/1. And the opposite would be up to 2/1. Okay, so let's go ahead and graph that. Put in our little perpendicular mark and just then label this line. Label it with the original equation that was given right here. So y plus 1 equals negative 2x. And there you have it. If you did this and your work looks exactly like mine, you did a wonderful job. If not, go ahead and change yours so yours looks exactly like mine. All right, we will see you in a little bit for the next example.